All right, everyone, welcome back to The Tsunami is Coming. What keeps me up at night, I can tell you that right now in Paris, a lot of people are kept up by the heat. I don't know where you guys are right now, but it is incredibly hot. So this is why I'm sweaty. It is not because I'm nervous, because I am so happy to speak to Ryan Howard. Ryan, thank you so much for joining me. A
Great to be here. Same for us here in London. I think it's across the board, hot everywhere. Yeah.
See, we're treated with the same respect from Mother Nature, I guess. Ryan is an MBA alum from HEC Paris, an alum of the tech industry as well, with a special focus on robotics. Dear Ryan, thank you so much. And to you, like to all of my other guests, I ask you, Ryan, what keeps you up at night besides the heat, I guess?
Yeah, great to be here, Jeremy. And it's been a long time since I used to hang around after your class trying to pick your brain on geopolitics. So, congratulations on the podcast. And I love the question. What keeps me up at night at this point in my somewhat unconventional career is integrity, scientific and economic integrity. And so, as a bit of a backstory on why that's relevant to me. I'm wearing this steel ring on my right finger of my working hand, which is a Canadian tradition. So this is an iron ring where we take an oath of good practice based on a bridge that fell down in Quebec in 1907 and killed 75 people. So through my career, I was working in oil and gas. I then came to HEC, jumped location, industries, roles to work in operations, in tech, and then in robotics for just over the last 8 years. Um, Scientific integrity, economic integrity has been very important to me. And I guess what keeps me up at night, to be specific, is that I like doing cost benefit analysis. Did it at HEC, did it in my prior role. I actually took a pay cut back in Alberta to do that at an oil company. And I feel like these days, especially in energy and specifically in automation, we're choosing one of the two, and you can't do that in a cost benefit analysis. And I think, as you say, the tsunami is coming. Certainly in automation, we're seeing it across robotics and now AI. And I think there's some costs and some benefits that I've come across that I think are quite important that we aren't really seeing the consideration that maybe they deserve.
Now that's a fascinating thing to ponder, and there are many layers to what you just said. Let's start with that unconventional profile. So you're known as a person after your MBA of having done the famous triple jump. So could you speak to what a triple jump is for the listeners who may not be familiar with that expression? And could you tell us what has that meant for you in the context that you just described?
This is a bit embarrassing, I have to be honest. I didn't know what a triple jump was before HEC. And like the old joke goes, people make plans and God laughs. So I had a whole plan. I had a whole plan. I was enjoying upstream exploration as a petroleum engineer, wanted to do that internationally. The price of oil was above $100 a barrel. What could possibly go wrong? And ended up pivoting to tech and then to robotics. And I guess what made that all happen was pretty boring, was just incremental changes. Every step I made was just a step a bit further. Operations, I'd done operations back home. Okay, I can do this. Robotics, I did that as part of my master's in biomedical engineering. So it was these little incremental changes that ended up resulting in a great adventure that I've had over here. And I guess what that's meant is that the
So just
gamble I yeah,
triple jump means so you changed jobs, or
yeah, it's
sectors,
jobs, sector,
and
location, right?
geography, and
Yes.
location, geography.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
and how did that feed into this whole conversation of cost benefit analysis? Do you feel that as a person in terms of integrity, you've been there, you've seen that in many different places, many different places. Does that help ultimately?
Definitely. I think the gamble that I took was on flexibility, and that we aren't in the world of working for the same company for 40 years anymore. So I had to apply the lessons I'd learned from the different roles I'd had to what's coming now. I mean, robotics, you're generally working on things that didn't exist a few years ago, and in a few years, you're going to be working on new things there. So certainly that has been dynamic and interesting, but there's been trends that I've noticed across energy, certainly across biomedical research, and now across automation that are pretty interesting. So when it comes to AI, I think it takes integrity for a business school professor at HEC to say, I'm not sure what's coming. I don't know what's going on. I think that's correct. But I think there's a lot of predictions happening right now, a lot of assumptions. We don't know how this is going to go, but I think we can go back to the fundamental facts that we know. We can look at the costs and the benefits to get a better idea of where this is. And from my experience, certainly in robotics, I see some pretty interesting trends. I mean, one example that I
Yeah,
think,
please do. Please speak
yeah,
to
yeah,
that. What are you seeing? So I'm not going to ask you what's going to happen because you just told us we don't know.
I
But let's
don't
play with assumptions. What's out there? What's in the realm of
exactly.
possibilities?
What do we know? I think we start with the benefits of automation, and of course, automating things that's been, I think, an obsession for human beings for over 100 years. If you need me to move a ton of buckwheat from Brittany to Paris, I'm not gonna get a backpack. I'll get a lorry to do it. So that's obvious, and I think we're getting a bit too caught up in that, certainly with AI. But one thing that constrains that, one cost that I think isn't being taken into consideration, and all due respect to human beings, but people are pretty cheap. So when it comes to robotics, whatever country you're in, for a minimum wage, you can get two of these. I'm waving my hands and two of these, my eyeballs. This is a precision engineered system that's been iterating designs for millions of years. And so this is at minimum wage. And so, okay, now with AI, we're into the white collar world, but with the costs of compute going up, a lot of these companies are trying to gain users at lower prices, a lot of VC funding. We've seen that playbook before. It's actually still pretty cheap to get people to do white collar jobs. And so I think what that reminds me of is the cost benefit curve, sorry, the supply demand curve you showed in your class with unconventional oil. And as oil gets more expensive, unconventionals come online. Alberta, where I'm from, gets better. And I think we're seeing the same thing with costs of white collar workers. We've all seen the AI apocalypse is coming in multiple news articles, but really what I think we're seeing here is just a correction. And so as the supply goes up, the price is going to go down. And as much as I want everyone to make a good salary, I think we are going to see a correction there with white collar workers, but it is going to be a sweet spot that I don't think people are thinking of. Before you lay off 30% of your workforce, you should probably think what tasks are actually going to be cheaper for a person to do, even if that's a well-paid software developer. I think that sweet spot is a cost we haven't really understood yet.
Yeah, and it also seems to me that that sweet spot really depends on how we define it, the conditions, the context in which we define it, and that you've hinted in this conversation that we may be landing on a different planet. So that very definition of the sweet spot may be hard to find when all of the things are moving.
We could see a lot of luxury applications, luxury
Yeah.
robotics, luxury automation, but I think I don't get a sense that we know where that spot is, and I think people are cheaper than I think is being assumed. Another interesting cost that I don't think is being taken into consideration is the cost of errors.
Mm,
So when AI is a great acronym, but from my background, what we're talking about is actually statistical prediction based on large data sets.
mm.
Statistical inferencing is even a bit generous. So predictions are not facts. And just as the mechanics of that mean that there are going to be errors and there are going to be some very costly errors. I was at a trade show in March in Germany talking to two supply chain professionals in the automotive industry, and they were saying, look, AI can do our jobs, but if there's a hallucination that goes through on a bid or a contract, we're legally liable for this. So that cost is exponential. So as we get into more predictive models, we have to understand what the costs of those are going to be. Self-driving cars are a great example. The costs of an error there are pretty severe, and I think only now is that industry getting to grips with that.
And it's not entirely clear. The costs are pretty severe, without a doubt. I agree, and it's not entirely clear that society is ready to accept them. As you know, conventional wisdom says, a car accident between two humans, it's a tragedy, but a car accident with casualties involving a robot is a pure scandal.
This is the trolley problem, right? And I'm not going to say what is right or wrong, but people need to be comfortable with that for this to truly take hold. So that's an interesting one. And another cost that I think is well known, but I think there's a different way to think about it, is that of data security. So we've long known that these companies are hoovering up giant amounts of our data. We surprisingly comfortable with that. And now they're developing incredibly sophisticated analysis techniques for that data. So, okay, that's not new. That's not a surprise. But what I've noticed about that cost, I mean, it's more of a risk, is that these are companies that have been incredibly successful. These are some of the most successful companies in the history of the world. They make up a shocking percentage of the US stock market. So my thought there is what happens when things aren't going well? And for the business nerds out there, there's a company called Nortel that was a Canadian telecom company. And the first job I ever had, I shared an office with an engineer from Nortel. And he told me a story that the company was doing so well, over $100 Canadian a share. They took them on a Caribbean cruise, and they were on the cruise having a party when they found out that the price had dropped below a dollar. And so what happens? What happens at a company with all your data and almost godlike powers to process it when that happens? I knew another guy who actually liquidated assets for Nortel. And so he would be in a factory and someone would come in with a literal brick of cash and say, "Hey, can we just sell this off under the table?" And he'd have to say, "No, no, we have to do it. We have to do it legally." So that's a risk I think that we're all taking. Yes, these companies are doing well right now. We feel relatively comfortable with our data, but what happens when the tsunami hits and things don't turn out how everyone told us they would?
Let's go back to the triple jump. Now that you have this experience, that you've seen this and that, I mean, truth be told, we're going through fascinating times, not always very reassuring, but most certainly fascinating times. What are your thoughts, the lessons you draw in terms of the type of behaviors, of know-hows, of skills that you need to survive while landing on this different planet that you've described?
I mean, that was the gamble I took to get into it was on flexibility, but I think you need to learn how to learn, and I think we do come back to scientific fundamentals. Sorry to sound boring, but that's what I mean when I talk about integrity. I'm just talking about as an engineer, you need to know the pluses, the negatives, the costs, the benefits to properly address problems, and I think we're seeing the same story over and over again. Yes, the tech that's coming out now is amazing. It has a ton of potential. These are amazing tools. But I think to really evaluate them, it's just like the economist Thomas Sowell says, there are no solutions, only trade-offs. And so I'm very positive overall on where things are going if we can get that right. So it's a bit of an old school message there of just scientific due diligence, of being intellectually honest, which is how I first learned in the lab I did my graduate studies on, and what I try to do now across many different industries.
And we'll end with this, and maybe my toughest question. Do you find it challenging to be intellectually honest in such a dogmatic and polarized era? How do you manage?
That's a very interesting question. I managed by moving to Europe, and that's not entirely a joke. I find that there are some very reasonable people out there. Certainly in Europe, I've had some very blunt and difficult conversations, but I think it comes back to, I know this is getting a bit gauche in the area of AI, but it comes back to leadership. It comes
Hmm.
back to good teams, good leaders. And I think now seeing AI come in and flattening of organizations, it's very difficult to put to quantify the value of good leadership. I took a stab at it, and football, I mean soccer, I know nothing about it, but I always see these managers in the news here in the UK, and so I took a look. A manager makes 2 to 3% of a top Premier League's team revenue. That's an
Hmm.
incredible amount of money. I wish
Hmm.
them the best. But do we understand that benefit of leadership there? I think that's very important to put the right teams in place where you can have those difficult conversations that I like having in Europe. Certainly, we used to have them, and so to me, it's about that making making that scientific integrity a la mode and fashion again, because that's how you get to the best decisions. And so, yeah, we've got some huge challenges. The tsunami's coming in energy, it's coming in automation, but I'm positive about what the opportunities are. These are great tools. The technology is incredible, and I think once we assess it properly, there's a lot of potential.
Right. Thank you so much, Ryan. I don't think we've exhausted this conversation, but I hope you come again.
Would love to. Lots to talk about. Yeah, it's hard to pick one thing. Definitely.
Thank you so, so much. This was actually the last episode of What Keeps Me Up at Night for series number one. So I'm glad I concluded with those thoughtful words. So thank you so much. Everyone, keep cool if you're somewhere in Europe caught in this heat wave, and we'll speak very, very soon. Thank you, everyone.